So I say all the time, like, fucking pose. Because there's so much emphasis on these postures and alignment and styles of yoga. And it's honestly so much bullshit. Because I would often say, and I'll say to you today, if I did not believe that the practice of yoga deepened our relationship to God and increased our capacity to love, then I would walk away from it right now. We would not even be having this conversation. And that's because I have no interest in teaching a physical exercise or physical practice. Like, my interest and my desire is to connect people to God and deepen their relationship to their understanding of God. My desire is to give us the tools so that we can show up from a place of love every day, no matter what. And we can see God in everything and everyone. Aside from that, I have no desire to teach postures.
Hey everyone, my name is Sarah and welcome to Her Ascension Story, the podcast that proves the world is transformed by every hero's personal adventure. Here we talk about the real and the raw things that we should all be talking about more. So if you want to be a part of the movement of getting real about the deeper, more meaningful things about life, be sure to subscribe and follow and get ready to get real. My hope is that this platform inspires you to explore and expand new empowering beliefs about yourself so you can make your own impassionate impact too. And those three pillars, inspiration, independence, and impact, aren't just the premise for this podcast, but for my work too. If you want to check out that more, be sure to go to herascensionstory.com or check me out on social media at Her Ascension Story. Welcome back, everyone. Today with me is Troy Hadeed, who's a yoga teacher who trains other yoga teachers in and online from Trinidad and Tobago. I found him years ago thanks to his multiple TV series on Gaia, especially the one called Being Present in Love and Understanding Yoga and Relationships. And I am so excited for this opportunity, so thank you so much for being here with us today, Troy.
Yeah, pleasure. It is an honor, and I'm really glad to be here. So thanks for having me.
Oh, awesome. So I really love the work that you do. So I took a virtual yoga class with you in November, and I love the way that you teach. It's so authentic, and I especially love how you focus on going deeper into spirit and self-discovery through not just asana, but all of yoga.
Yeah.
Were you always kind of drawn to yoga, or how did you get to be where you are now?
It's actually a really not funny, but really cool story. I would have to say that from a young age, I was always drawn to Eastern tradition and Eastern culture. But when I graduated from university in 2001, I was not practicing yoga, but I knew I was going to teach yoga. So somebody would ask me, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to become a yoga teacher. I'm not too sure when, but I knew I was going to teach yoga. And I didn't know quite how it would happen, but when somebody did ask me, what is my original influence from of yoga? How did yoga find me? How did I find yoga? I recall being about 14 years old when I was in school in Trinidad. And there was this teacher that all I remember is I used to go up, give up my lunchtime, and every lunchtime I would go up to sit with him, and he would give me these books to read, which were all yogic texts and Eastern tradition and Eastern teachings, all these texts and books to read. And I've always said that his name was Mr. Gaia TV. And I always said that I wish I could find him one day to let him know how he could have possibly influenced my life at 14 years old. And so I've been telling this story and talking about him for the last 25 years, pretty much. And last January, not 2020, but 2019, I got this message in my email. And usually all the comments on my website go to junk. But this one somehow came to my email. And it read, I think I gave you Practice of Brahmacharya to read in 1994, S. Gaia Dean. So of course I didn't know what to do, but I emailed him. I replied right away. And then he sent me his number and we started talking and we reconnected. And it's a really amazing story because he said to me, he said, Troy, I've been talking about you for the last 25 years. He said, I've been talking about this kid who was 14 and came up to detention, apparently. And I gave you the Practice of Brahmacharya to read as a joke. It was a text on sexual misconduct. I gave it to a 14-year-old boy to read as a joke. He said, and you sat down and you read this and you gobbled it up and you came up every lunchtime of your own free will to read more. And, you know, he references, he said, it's just so amazing that I've been talking about him and he's been talking about me, but we've had no contact for 25 years. He had no clue I was teaching yoga. He had no clue what had become of my life, you know. And how he found out was he's now teaching in Ontario, Canada. And he was talking about me again as this little boy at 14 years old who impressed him. And his kids Googled Troy Hadeed. And then I came up as a yoga teacher who was traveling the world teaching. And when he saw that, he said he almost fell off his chair. He just had to reach out. So I know that's a long answer to your question, but I think it's worth every second of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's so incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you're 14 and you're reading all of these deep texts.
Yeah.
Were you talking to your friends about it or trying to help inspire other people to get into it? Or
No.
were you just kind of soaking it all in for yourself? Or
I think I was just seeking and I wanted more out of life. Like I knew there was more and I was just seeking to learn. My friends at that time used to make fun of me because I used to give up my lunchtime to go upstairs and sit and read with a teacher. And I remember they used to make fun of me, but my friends have always been really supportive as well. So I can't say I would really come back and talk to them about what I was reading. I don't think they would quite get it. I don't think I got it at that age, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did you actually start to first off practice yoga, and then when did you start feeling called to help others with it?
Yeah. So I first started practicing asana practice probably at about I would say maybe 24 years old, a few years out of university. And it was a teacher in Trinidad called Karen Blackman. And she at that point had a studio called One Yoga Trinidad. And that was my first influence. And then they had a teacher training with a school out of Canada, Moksha Yoga out of Canada. And that was my very first teacher training. And I think that was like when I got a foot in the door. And I remember being at my first teacher training and ready to leave. It was in India. And I was like, I'll never be a yoga teacher. I could never do this. And I was ready to quit and leave. And yeah, I'm so glad I stuck it out because it is it's such a big part of my life at the moment, you know. But since then, I've done many more trainings and I have lots of hours under my belt.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What do you feel, for you personally, is the most beneficial aspect of yoga? I mean, we talk about asana and pranayama and samadhi, everything in general.
Yeah.
What do you find nourishes you the most?
Well, here's how I would say it, Sarah, and I say this a lot to people, like, can I play this on this podcast or no?
Yeah.
Okay,
go for it.
okay.
Be authentic.
All right. So I say all the time, like, fucking pose. Because there's so much emphasis on these postures and alignment and styles of yoga. And it's honestly so much bullshit. Because I would often say, and I'll say to you today, if I did not believe that the practice of yoga deepen our relationship to God and increase our capacity to love, then I would walk away from it right now. We would not even be having this conversation. And that's because I have no interest in teaching a physical exercise or physical practice. Like my interest and my desire is to connect people to God and deepen their relationship to their understanding of God. My desire is to give us a tool so that we can show up from a place of love every day, no matter what. And we can see God in everything and everyone. Aside from that, I have no desire to teach postures. But to answer your question, the practice of yoga is almost like a bridge, right? It's a tool that delivers a medicine, but in itself, it is not a medicine. A medicine is learning to be present, learning to quiet our minds, and learning to deepen our relationship with our breath, our mind, and our understanding of God. That is a medicine. The practice of yoga just is a capsule in which that medicine can be prescribed and delivered. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
So I think there's just way too much emphasis. Even like I'm all about traditional aspects of yoga and chanting and pranayama and sutras and all of it. But we can't get too attached to that because that's not the point. You know, it's in the very first and second teaching of Yoga Sutras. It's there. You know, yoga is now Atta Yoga Nushasanam. Yoga is the quieting of fluctuations of the mind. Yoga is Chitta Vritti Nirodha. That's it. We can stop there. Because that in itself, only in that moment of presence, in every moment, can we see God, can we see other people not as separate from who we are, but as part of who we are. And to me, that is the ultimate teaching. That is the ultimate practice of yoga. Other than that, it's all service.
I love how you say that we can't get too attached to the traditional teachings and everything. I mean, it's a different world than it is now. And yoga is now all across the world. And I saw that you are studied in various types of yoga. You have the Baptiste and the Iyengar and Vinyasa and pretty much just everything. And so what is your take on how Western society has taken yoga, and do you feel like it's turned it into something it's not, especially when it does come to asana or postures with the promiscuous poses and the 3 million Instagram followers on a page, that it's just not, it doesn't have a yoga vibe to it necessarily. It's just more about turning on people and showing off your body and everything. What's your take on all that?
I would have to say, Sarah, my take now is very different to my take. If you had asked me this question some years ago, I might have been a lot more rigid and borderline judgmental. But luckily, I've grown a lot in the last few years, I think, as an individual and a teacher and a practitioner. And the reality is that if you believe in the practice of yoga, if you believe in God, you know that God lives everywhere. And that even the very things we resist and we don't agree with are an aspect of ourselves. That's part of us. And as much as I resist those aspects of what's happening in Western culture with regards to yoga, it is necessary, I believe. I believe it has a place that maybe we don't quite understand. It is bringing a lot of people to yoga, to the practice of yoga. And whether they're coming for what we might call the right reasons or the wrong reasons, I also have come to believe that it might sound a little space age and mumbo jumbo, but breath has intelligence. And I believe that if we connect people to their breath, whether it be in an intimate way or not, the fact that they are being with their breath delivers to them an intelligence that they might not be aware of. And I believe like a lot of what's happening in the world now, when you look at the world of yoga, it's just a stage that has to happen for us to get where we need to get to. So I don't agree with it necessarily. I wish it would change. I wish that people would spend some time to really try to understand what this practice of yoga is. And stop just talking about what it's supposed to be and really begin to embody what it should be. So I that's my view. I would say I would say though that I don't think it's just a Western problem. I think it's also happening in the East. I remember last year I went to a yoga festival on the bank of the Ganges River in Rishikesh. And yeah, I was so disappointed because I found that I was hoping to get away from a whole yoga festival vibe. And even among Indian teachers, there was so much of that still being delivered as the depth and practice of yoga. And I think just to close on that note, I think we as yoga teachers and yoga practitioners have to remember that this is not entertainment. Like, we're not here to show off or entertain people. We're here to drop one another in. We're here to do a work and to see how we can show up from a place of love no matter what, even when it's inconvenient and it's hard. How can we see God, And I remember my first teacher training, I was actually told not to talk about God. I was told not to bring God into the practice room. And while I understand why I was taught that, and it does have merit to it, I am so glad that I later found teachers who, in other words, gave me permission to bring God and spirit into the practice room. Yeah.
Wow. So do you feel like you say that it's not just Western teachers, it's Eastern teachers too. Do you feel like the twist on yoga or the distraction that has kind of permeated its way into the science, do you feel like that starts at a teacher level or it starts at the individual practitioner level of just wherever anybody starts on their yoga journey? They have to experience, of course, the duality, the purely physical part and the mental and the spiritual and the breath and everything. But where do you think that shift would actually begin towards more authenticity?
Well, you see, if you're asking about authenticity, I'm speaking to you now, Sarah, and I can only speak to you as what's authentic to me. But if you brought someone else in the room, they'll speak to you about what's authentic to them. And that might be completely different. So I can only speak to what I feel is the depth of yoga practice and yoga teaching. And if you're asking me where I think that realization or that awareness needs to come from, I would naturally, it would happen quicker if teachers began to acknowledge this, began to feel it, and began to teach it, because teachers are teaching people and practitioners. But I also feel that on a personal level, like there's gonna come a time where practitioners like, there has to be something more to this. And that practitioner is gonna begin to seek out something more. And sometimes that something more might be disguised as whether it be chanting or meditation or, a different style of yoga, a different aspect of the practice of the yoga. But I have faith that at some time it's going to happen. And whether somebody call it yoga, or whether somebody call it something else, or whether somebody discover this ability to love and this relationship to the mind, the breath, and God through something else that might not even resemble yoga, I just have faith that it's going to happen, and it's time.
It is time for sure.
Yeah.
You make me excited. I mean, you see those like those Instagram pages and everything, but your perception of it makes it seem like we can actually be excited about that because they've at least come to the mat and their story is evolving, and not just, I'm not saying that that's unevolved to do that at all. We all have our journeys and it's perfectly timed and perfectly placed and it's always just perfect as it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that actually kind of changed my perception of it to get more excited about it.
Yeah, it took me a little while, Sarah, to be honest. Like I was resistant it a lot, yeah, and sometimes I feel like I'm resistant to a lot of things that I'm not in alignment with. But then we also have to remember that, and I think right now this is big because we're living in a world that's so opinionated about so many things and people are so emotionally charged. But if we ever want to influence something or shift something into alignment in a certain way, there's one sure way to make sure that we never have that opportunity, and that's by judging it. And the second we judge something, we've now built a wall. Even if we judge someone, we've built a wall. We've now created separation between me and whatever that is. And as long as we do that, we have no opportunity to influence whatever that is. But if we can see ourselves in something or in someone, and if we can see and acknowledge their journey, and in other words, respect and befriend it, we don't have to agree with it, but somehow keep that door open, then we might just find that we have a lot more in common and that we now have an opportunity to really influence that individual or that aspect of our world,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so we talked about, an obstacle to just yoga in the world in general, but what are some of the biggest obstacles that you've had to face on your journey?
Wow. Well, I have to say too, Sarah, I always say this and I feel somewhat guilty, but I consider myself really blessed and really fortunate for whatever reason. There are very few times in my life where I feel like life had really brought me to my knees. It hasn't happened very often. And I would say around my yoga teaching, which I assume is what you're referencing, directing this question towards, I would have to say that one of my biggest challenges, especially living in Trinidad, is that people carry this stereotype around what yoga is, what yoga looks like. And I remember having at one point, there's growing up in a Catholic society or Catholic circles and a Catholic family, that people in Trinidad love to talk a little bit, and there's always all this discussion and people saying stuff about how yoga is not in line with Christian beliefs or whatever it is, and how it's a Hindu practice, and people even go as far as to say as it's demonic and all kind of absolute nonsense. And I've never really paid much attention to what anybody said for my entire life. And thank God I didn't then either. But I think for me, one of the biggest challenges with regards to sharing yoga is that people have this stereotype and they don't always quite get it, right? But I would like to believe that if you practice in a certain way and if you show up in a room in a certain way, that the second someone steps into that room, they're going to kind of understand that it is not what they originally thought it was, and that there's a power there that maybe they cannot quite explain. So I would say that was one of my challenges, and still is overcoming stereotypes with regards to the practice of yoga.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to see parts of the world so accepting of it and parts just so in denial or rejection of it still.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you talk about, using yoga to connect to something deeper within you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that that process alone has brought transformation into your life.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit more about that.
Ooh, you get into good stuff. Okay, so I always tell people, for me, there were a few things that happened along my yoga journey, that really transformed my practice and my understanding. And I would think it first is when I learned to breathe. I learned to breathe probably a few years after I even did yoga teacher training. And I had done a few yoga teacher trainings at that point. But when I actually learned how the anatomy of the breath worked, I was blown away. I was like, well, why was this not taught to me in school as an athlete or at yoga teacher training? Why was I not taught this aspect of how breath actually worked? And I won't deliver that entire thing now, but in short, the reality of how we breathe is that we don't pull air into our body. We create space and we create a vacuum in which air moves inside of us. So we don't actually pull air inside of us. We don't actually breathe. We create space to be breathed by something externally. And breath is the one thing that connects every living being. To imagine, Sarah, that you're in Ohio and I'm in Trinidad, but at some point, the air that was once inside of me is going to be inside of your body if it wasn't already. And it's one thing that connects every living being on the planet. So when I began to understand how breath worked, and I began to understand the power when you brought intimacy into your yoga practice. That is not a yoga practice that looks like aerobics, but a yoga practice that looks a lot more like Tai Chi. So when you start to move with this long, intimate breath and this slow, graceful movement, and your concentration, your focus becomes your relationship to your breath. That in itself brought a power into my practice that I could feel. I could feel my practice had now transformed into something different. It now crossed the line. But I couldn't quite understand what was happening just yet. And then something, I always say there's something because I really can't remember what it was, but something brought me to Google and look up the word spirit. And in doing that, I discovered that the word spirit, like Holy Spirit, meant to breathe. And I think for me, it brought two worlds together where I now understood, one of my teachers, Sean Korn, who's probably one of my biggest influences as a yoga teacher and maybe even a human being, has always brought God into the practice room and delivered the ideology that this yoga practice is a form of prayer. And all of a sudden now, I learned that the word spirit means to breathe. It comes from the Latin word spiritus. So now, for me, there was a line drawn that every breath I take is God moving inside of me. That yoga practice is an intimacy with God. It's like making love to God is what it is. But it's not something that only happens on a mat. It also happens off our mat in our lives, but we're just not paying attention to it. So if we can create this relationship to God within our breath on our yoga mat, and we can then take that off our yoga mat, then just maybe our lives can become living prayers, rather than prayer just being something we do every now and again.
Wow.
Yeah.
That realization's a huge transformation.
Yeah. For me, it was huge, and I do believe, Sarah, I always tell people, sometimes I have students, come and say, man, well, thanks for fucking up my yoga practice. Because I do not believe once you feel that and you experience that, there's no going back. Like, you can't go back to a fast, disconnected aerobic style practice after that. There's no going back once you feel that, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I love how you correlate it to Tai Chi
Yeah.
instead of aerobics.
Yeah.
It gives the perfect visualization of what a practice can actually be and how the breath can fully connect you. Like that union that we talk about for yoga, it just goes so much deeper than that.
Yeah, absolutely. I once
Wow.
had a teacher in Trinidad, and I may have only done one class with him. He's an old Indian teacher, and he teaches meditation. But in his meditation class, he said something I will never forget, and I will probably use it till the day I die, as long as I'm teaching yoga. He said, move with so much grace that you don't even disturb the air around you. And what better vision of union and yoga is there than to be even in union with the air that surrounds us?
Wow.
Yeah.
That feels so good.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's what I try to think of when I practice and when I teach, is how can I connect people to that, you know?
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah.
So do you feel like that's the most helpful advice or activity that you've kind of acquired and obtained on your path and process?
Definitely one of. I mean, I wouldn't say the most, because I've had so many great teachers and so much amazing influences along this path that I don't think I could choose anyone as the biggest influence, or the most, or that one point. I think I owe who I am as a teacher today to a lot of people and a lot of situations and a lot of mentorship. And I think it continues to create who I am as a person and as a teacher, you know?
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And so what sort of goals or dreams have come to fruition because of your transformation process into who you are today?
Well, I would say we, because it's not a I. We now have this beautiful yoga community and yoga studio in Trinidad. And it's called One Yoga Trinidad, and it was born out of One Yoga Canada from my friend and teacher Ryan Lair in Saskatoon. And we are now actually rebranding a little bit, just because we need a little bit of our own freedom to do different things and fulfill our own identity. But to answer your question, what I've seen through this journey and what's created for me, Sarah, is it's more than anything I could have dreamed. Like, if you had asked me 15 years ago if I would have ever imagined this, I may have said yes, because it sounds fun to imagine, but I would have never really believed it would have come to pass. I also am now, like I mentioned earlier, now finishing up my first book, which will be in the hands of an editor soon, and I will be looking for an agent and a publisher very shortly. And I'm so excited about this book, because I think at 18 years old, I knew I was going to write and be somewhat of a writer. And I wanted to do writing and philosophy in university, but my dad was like, that don't pay bills. So I did Spanish and business. But I think I did Spanish and business for a reason, because I don't think at 18, 20 years old, I had any clue. I had no clue. I was so clueless. I think it's taken me this much time to get to where I am and feel that, because I've tried to write this book many times, but this year it happened, I think 14 January. And everything just aligned and it felt right. And when I look back on my journey as a yoga teacher and a yoga practitioner, I think that journey gave me everything I needed to write this book. And had I even thought of writing this book at that age or any time before this, it would have been an absolute disaster. So I think my yoga practice, just to sum it up, it's everything that's in my life now I owe to my yoga practice, I think, because I think it has shaped me and the individual I am in such a profound way that everything I have is because of that, because I've shown up to my mat, connecting to God, connecting to spirit each and every day as much as I can on a daily basis. And it's also helped me detach from this identity of Troy, of me, of I. And I feel that now maybe I'm beginning to get a glimpse of something aside from that,
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. So you mentioned your One Yoga studio in Trinidad.
Yeah.
What are the values of that community, and how do you see people, or how do you see that impacting the people who come to you or that join your community?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to say because I don't a lot of our community I don't really see too much outside of our community, but a lot of our practitioners have been practicing with me, 6, 7, 8 years, and they're still coming back. And I think for them, I know what a constant it is in their life and how much they depend on it, whether it be the actual practice or something that we talk about in the room during their practice. And a lot of them go away and they practice away and they come back and say, man, like, it's not the same. And then you see people travel internationally to come to practice here. And I think it really gives them a value and an understanding of how special our community is. Because if it's all you know and you have nothing to really hold it up against, it's very easy to take it for granted, But I think our community means a lot to each and every one of our members. And now that of course, with COVID, we've branched off online. So we have our online platform, beyondyogatv.com, which we are working towards growing. But we have such an international presence, community joining on that platform now as well. That it's just really beautiful, For me personally, it just gives me the reassurance sometimes that what we're doing is influencing people and making a difference in the world. And Bob Marley once said, my life is not for me, my life is for everyone else. If my life is just for me, I would rather not have it. And I think for me, that's how I feel, that I know my time and our time is limited. And I would like to know that whatever I bring to this beautiful place has a lasting resonance to it and really impacts the lives of people. And I feel that what we have created has done that and is doing that.
There's so much love in that.
Yeah, thank you. It is. Well, I also say, Sarah, that, our community, I also have to say, doesn't, yes, somebody might say I'm a lead teacher or call in and call me owner when they walk inside, but really and truly, I'm not. And I and we could not have this if it were not for our entire community. And there are so many people that are part of our community that have made this happen. And without them, it would not be what it is today.
Yeah, that's a true definition of community right there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the book and Beyond Yoga TV, and of course, I mentioned the Gaia TV series before, but
Yeah.
where else can people find you and your work?
Well, troyhadeed.com is my website. They could find me on social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook. BeyondYogaTV.com is a huge one we're really excited about. I'm on Gaia. I don't know. They could fly to Trinidad.
That sounds great.
Yeah, they could come down. We had a teacher training scheduled for October that we just had to push to 2021 because we had quite a bit of international practitioners and our borders are still closed. So I do intend to be hosting a lot of retreats and trainings as soon as I can. But I also hope to have the opportunity to travel and teach a little bit more and be online. And, people, I try to make myself as accessible as possible. So if anybody has this and they want to reach out and have a chat, I'm always available.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I just have one last question,
Sure.
and it's my favorite question. I think it's great to be asked, but also for everybody listening to ask themselves. And the question is, who is the superhero inside of you that has all the power you could ever need?
Who is the superhero inside of me? So you're asking me to reference an already existing superhero.
Mm-hmm.
Is Jesus. Is he considered? Because he would absolutely be my superhero.
I love that so much.
I think he's the greatest yogi that ever walked the planet. And I think I try to, when I talk about him, I try to be accessible to anyone and all belief systems. So I would say that maybe he never walked the planet. Maybe not. But the idea that we can embody a love that's fierce and courageous in human form, that's what I dedicate. I would like to embody one day, maybe in another lifetime, if not this one. But that's what I would like to dedicate my life towards attaining and helping other people attain. So that would be my superhero.
That's powerful. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, and I have so much appreciation, and it's such an honor to be able to share it.
Yeah, Sarah, I'm really happy and I'm really grateful you reached out and you asked. And anytime you want to chat, I'm open. So thank you for having me. Being in Trinidad, it's like a little bubble, right? Now, I was not to go into a whole next conversation, but when I first got the opportunity to teach yoga online, I didn't want to do it, and I did. And being in Trinidad, and I've never regretted it since. But being in Trinidad is like a little bubble, right? So you don't always realize your reach or people you're influencing. And every time someone reaches out, like yourself, from US or Japan or Australia, and you really get a glimpse of your reach and where your vibration is affecting, it really gives meaning to what we choose to do with our lives. And for me, it means the world. So thank you.
I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. I hope that this episode has some way inspired you to take control, given you the tools to feel secure and on fire in your own independence, and help to unlock within you the impact that you're here to make. You're not born with a purpose. You're born as your purpose. It's already inside of you, and it's your responsibility in this life to live that in the truest way possible. If you've gotten any sort of value out of this episode, please share it so that we can together expand our inspiration and our impact in this world.